A new rule in honor of the Academy Awards show this Sunday. Tonight, I would like to commemorate the moment 50 years ago that transformed the Oscar telecast into what it is today. A 4-hour lecture on how bad most people have it by the people who have it the best. You rail against privilege, but you avail yourself of the greatest privilege of all, to remain clueless. Dave Chappelle lashed out at me last month because I called him out for saying there was more free speech in Saudi Arabia than here. Well, I was right. What he said was stupid. America has many problems, including free speech issues on both left and right, but we're real different than Saudi Arabia. If you don't believe me, try opening a lesbian art gallery there.
So when people leave California, the surprise feels dishonest. Businesses relocate. Families cash out. Young professionals flee to states like Texas, Florida, and Tennessee, where productivity isn't treated like a crime. According to recent migration data, this isn't ideological, it's economic survival. Cities deteriorate. Schools fail. Crime rises while leaders obsess over optics instead of outcomes. Mayor's warning is clear: California isn't failing because it lacks compassion. It's failing because it lacks restraint, competition, and accountability. And that's where the story gets uncomfortable, because no one in power wants to admit how close we already are.
A Golden Globe nomination for the one I did.
Oh, really?
That's yesterday.
How often do you get nominated for your specials?
Nothing. I used to get nominated for everything.
Yeah.
And then, the wokeness came in, and then I was considered conservative, which
are you bad?
ridiculous. So I was what I call soft canceled.
Yeah.
Where you don't
Well, I'm a Bill Clinton liberal, which is from the 90s, which is now called a Nazi.
Exactly, right.
Yeah.
You're a white supremacist.
So this is the first time in a while I've been nominated for something.
Okay.
Which I think shows a little bit that we are coming out of the woke.
Enter Bill Maher, the inconvenient truth teller Hollywood never fully disinvites but never fully embraces either, the guy who says out loud what many whisper behind champagne flutes. His crime isn't ideological betrayal, it's behavioral defiance. He questioned progressive orthodoxy, and in modern entertainment culture, questioning is treated like contamination. According to recent audience trust surveys and voting trends, cultural institutions lose credibility fastest when dissent is punished quietly rather than debated openly. Psychologically, people recognize social enforcement even when it's subtle: fewer invitations, colder rooms, the soft exile that signals, you're still here, but don't forget your place. That's not accountability. That's control by atmosphere.
It's not one that the woke can watch and not throw up, because I call their shit out. And the fact that people are laughing shows that it's funny. When you do stupid things, it's funny. And the left did a lot more stupid things in the last 5 to 10 years. And I'm a comedian. I go where the gold is. And it's hitting the side of a barn to make fun of some of this shit.
Sure, it's too easy.
If you think... I quoted very esteemed publications like The Atlantic, or saying things like, separating sports by sex doesn't make sense. Well, if that's not of course it does. If anybody can't do 5 minutes on that, or Mr. Beast, who was helping disabled people, and the Washington Post guy was tweeting like, he thinks disability is something that needs to be
Now, critics will argue Bill Maher is just bitter, a relic raging at a culture that outgrew him, but that argument collapses under scrutiny. Maher calls himself a Bill Clinton-era liberal, once the mainstream center of American politics. Based on demographic shifts and exit polls from recent elections, that ideological space didn't vanish overnight, it was rebranded as suspect. The Overton window didn't move inch by inch, it lunged. When a moderate position is treated like extremism, people don't become enlightened, they become silent. And silence isn't progress, it's fear wearing a polite smile.
Reporter asked me why I wasn't wearing a lapel pin for the first Minneapolis shooting a couple of weeks ago, and I said, well, it was a terrible thing that happened, and it shouldn't have happened, and if they didn't act like such thugs, it wouldn't have had to happen, but I don't need to wear a pin about it. Now, please understand, I had no idea this question was coming, and so tonight I'd like to say that if I had the chance to think about it, my answer would be exactly the same.
Here's where the system exposes itself. After years of soft sidelining, Maher suddenly finds himself welcomed back, nominated again, praised again. Why? Not principle, momentum. Hollywood doesn't operate on values the way real communities do, it operates on vibes, trends, and risk management. When the cultural wind shifts, yesterday's liability becomes today's asset. Data from recent election cycles shows institutions pivot not when ideas fail, but when audiences disengage. This isn't moral growth, it's brand recalibration. War metaphors fit here because this isn't debate, it's territory control, retreating just enough to avoid collapse.
Except all of them. You posers. 3 years ago, everybody was all into Ukrainian flags. What happened to that? Another cause tossed into the junk drawer with yesterday's choke collar? Get out of here with your virtue-signaling body ornaments. They're just crucifixes for liberals.
Maher's deeper insight cuts harder, comedy follows reality, and reality has been overflowing with absurdity delivered at full confidence. Psychologically, laughter is a truth detector, people laugh when something hidden becomes visible. When certain groups declare themselves beyond satire, they don't become protected, they become targets. This lands at a human level because adults recognize tantrums even when they are wrapped in academic language. You can't demand seriousness while behaving unseriously. Comedy doesn't create the crack, it reveals it.
Congratulations for raising awareness. The awareness you really care about, which is how wonderful you are. Ricky Gervais once told the award show crowd, "Don't use it as a platform to make a political speech. You're in no position to lecture the public about anything. You know nothing about the real world." And of course, this is where celebrities say, "How dare you? We're citizens with just as much right to speak out." Agreed, you absolutely do. I'm just saying, don't. It's having the opposite effect of what you...
Then comes the ritual theater, the pins, ribbons, colors, scarves, moral accessories worn like armor. A tragedy happens, complexity erupts, and suddenly symbolism replaces substance. Maher's refusal to wear a lapel pin wasn't apathy, it was rebellion against performative ethics. Cold analysis makes this clear, symbolic signaling has increased while measurable outcomes remain flat. Caring privately and acting locally solves more than broadcasting virtue globally. The villain behavior here isn't compassion, it's substitution. Replacing action with optics. Turning morality into wardrobe management.
Greatest privilege of all, to remain clueless. Dave Chappelle lashed out at me last month because I called him out for saying there was more free speech in Saudi Arabia than here. Well, I was right. What he said was stupid. America has many problems, including free speech issues on both left and right, but we're real different than Saudi Arabia. If you don't believe me, try opening a lesbian art gallery there.
Critics respond, so you don't care. That's the sleight of hand. Caring and performing care are not the same. Most people contribute quietly because real empathy doesn't need an audience. Hollywood's model, by contrast, is spectacle-first activism, cry on camera, post on schedule, return to comfort. This disconnect explains why trust erodes. According to longitudinal trust data, people reject moral instruction fastest when delivered by those insulated from consequences. It feels less like leadership and more like scolding from a safe distance.
Come up with new categories for the awards. The Golden Globes came up with a new one this year that basically picture people liked. They had, they had become such self-congratulating, virtue-signaling bores that they had to go, oh yeah, let's make a category for that. People actually paid to see something great. So there's a new Oscar.
Maher's line should be etched in stone, railing against privilege while enjoying the greatest privilege of all, remaining clueless. That's not a joke, it's diagnosis. The celebrity bubble functions like a fortified city, where bad ideas survive because reality can't breach the walls. This is why comparisons like, less free speech than Saudi Arabia, don't sound brave, they sound detached. Facts matter. You can criticize America without abandoning proportionality. Free speech debates collapse when hyperbole replaces honesty, and audiences sense that immediately.
In honor of the Academy Awards show this Sunday, tonight, I would like to commemorate the moment 50 years ago that transformed the Oscar telecast into what it is today. A 4-hour lecture on how bad most people have it by the people who have it the best. I'm constantly amazed when I rewatch movies from only a decade or so ago, and they were made in a way that today would get you burned at the Twitter.
The Dave Chappelle moment exposes this perfectly. When Chappelle suggested there was more free speech in Saudi Arabia than in the United States, Maher didn't celebrate the edginess, he rejected the absurdity. You can criticize American pressure campaigns, social media mobs, and institutional overreach without abandoning reality. Try opening a lesbian art gallery in Riyadh and see how theoretical that comparison remains. That's not ideology, that's scale. When celebrities abandon proportion, they don't sound courageous, they sound insulated.
Who's who of the most blue ribbon certified Hollywood liberals, woke approved and Democratic Party contributing, from the stars to the producers to the director, but it apparently occurred to none of them to have any kind of minority in the cast. You would need a divining rod to find a person of color within 500 feet of this movie.
So when Bill Maher says Hollywood lost touch, this isn't crankiness, it's pattern recognition. When art must pass an ideological purity test before it can breathe, creativity suffocates. If this continues, the next cultural battle won't be about left versus right, it'll be about credibility versus performance. Hollywood doesn't need better slogans, it needs humility. Not louder lectures, but sharper listening. And that's where the story gets uncomfortable, because the system survives on applause, not reflection. So the real question is whether this is the end of the performance era, or just the start of a quieter, rebranded version of the same act.